Hi, I'm Jessica, and today I'm going to show you how to put your quilt blocks together, then how to back them and add your batting, and then how to bind all of your blocks together. So we're going to start with our layout, and I'm going to show you a few different layouts and how to put these things together. We have two different collections here. These blocks are from the Crazy Christmas Quilt collection, which is in the project series, and these blocks are all from our foundations collection. I've used these large rectangles as my transitional pieces and this large square as my center. These pieces are the mitered corners that are the small mitered corners, and these are the small squares. I needed to use two squares here to equal the same as my large rectangle. So you can see that with our mix and match quilting collection, you're really able to create unique things by combining our different blocks. I've used this star quilting pattern since I thought that would go nicely with my Christmas theme. I've matched my thread on all of these, and on this block here I used clear monofilament thread so that the pattern would stick out. To put our blocks together, first thing to do is lay everything out and make sure you have all your pieces. Then we're going to start at the top. We're going to start by stitching these blocks together to create a row. Once I have this row created, I'm going to go through and stitch these blocks together to create this row. We start by stitching row to row all the way across. When I get here, I will stitch these two blocks together and these two blocks together and then stitch this row. And then I'll continue with my rows. These mitered corners I'll do when I'm stitching my rows together. So we're going to start out by stitching our blocks together. I will start up here. To start, we're going to put our blocks right sides together. I like to line up my corners and then place a pin and line up my second corner and place another pin. This will help to ensure that my blocks stay together and that everything stays straight. And then I'm going to use my machine. I like to use a walking foot so that this helps put my blocks together and helps walk through all the different layers. So since we've used a 1/2 inch seam allowance when we trim everything, we're going to make sure that we use a 1/2 inch seam allowance when we're stitching. This is our tacking line that's tacked all our fabric together. We want to make sure that our stitching line is just to the left of that so that it covers up these stitches as I'm stitching all my blocks together. So this is the most important part, is to take your time, line up your edges, and make sure that you carefully stitch through everything. I'm going to stop and take my pin out. I don't want to sew through that. You can see now that I've put these two blocks together that they line up. On the back, I'll take this to my iron and press the seam open. So now that I have these two blocks together, I'll grab my second block. I'm going to repeat the same process. Put right sides together, place a pin in each corner, and continue to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I will continue to go through and stitch all of my rows together, and then I'm going to go through and press everything open. Now that we've gone through and stitched all our rows together, we'll need to take this to the iron and press all our seams open. So you can see here that we've stitched all of our rows together. We want to take these to the iron, press them open, and press them nice and flat. Notice that with my mitered corners, I've stitched this piece to the next to bottom row, and I've stitched these ones to this row. I've stitched my small blocks together. I stitched those together, finger pressed them open, and then stitched this here as well. So now we're going to take these to the iron, and we're going to press everything open before we stitch our rows together. Now that I've taken all of my rows to the iron and pressed my seams open, it should look something like this. So we can look over here, and I've pressed all of my seams open. I pressed them nice and flat, and I used a lot of steam with my iron to make sure that they're pressed nice and flat. This will help my quilt lay flat later on. So you can see again, I've gone through and pressed all of my seam allowances open. So the next step is to sew our rows together. So I'm going to take my first two rows, my top row and my second row, and I'm going to place them right sides together. Okay. Now that I'm going to place my right sides together, to complete the mitered corner, I'm going to start at this first seam and sew across the top. Then I'll come back later and actually stitch my mitered corners separate. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to line this up and pin it. Then I'm going to continue across the rows. I'm going to make sure that I line my seams up. I'm going to line my first seam with my second seam on the bottom piece so that everything matches. So I'm going to take my time and go across the top along the row and put pins on either side so that once I've stitched it and opened it, my seams will line up. So this is a part that takes a little bit of extra time, but you want to make sure to take your time and put lots of pins to hold everything in place as you're going across. This will make your sewing a lot easier. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to stop again at this corner. Now I will go back and put a few extra pins in the middle just to hold everything straight, since this is a longer stretch than when I was sewing my blocks together. And I'm also going to go through the center and put a pin to help hold these open and flat. So now I'm going to take this to my machine, and again I'm going to stitch down. I'm going to start at this mitered corner, and I'm going to stitch using my 1/2 inch seam allowance, again just to the left side of this tacking stitch line. I'm going to stitch all of my rows together, and then I will take those to the iron and press those flat as well. Stitch a little bit and take your pin out, and then again just slowly take your time, line everything up, use a walking foot and stitch. When you get to your pin, you want to make sure you stop and pull it out. Okay, now that I have my first row stitched to my second row, I'm going to continue placing my rows together and stitch all of my rows together. Now that I've stitched all my rows together, we need to go through one last step and put my mitered corners together before we take the top to finish it. The last thing we're going to do is press everything open before we add our binding and our backing and our batting. So to do the mitered corner, what you're going to do is you're going to come to your corner and you are going to fold it on a 45-degree angle. So I've sewed these rows together but left this hole open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line these up. I'm going to start at the corner and use my pin to line that up, and then I'm going to fold this on the diagonal so that my corner will line up down here as well. So I'm going to place a pin there. Now when I sew, all I need to do is sew from the inside of my mitered corner to the outside. This will leave a little bit of a hole here, but it should be okay once I take it to my iron and press everything. You can see on the outside everything will lay nice and flat. So I'm going to take it to my machine. I think it's easier to start on the inside and work your way out. So I'm going to start on the inside, put my needle position down, make sure everything's lined up, put my needle down, and then stitch all the way out to the end of my mitered corner. Again, I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure I'm just to the left. Take my pin out. Now we'll look at this and you can see that that's right. So I'm going to go around and do the same thing with the other 3 corners. Then I'm going to take this to my iron and I'll press everything nice and flat. Then we're going to add our batting and our backing.